Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland a fantastic place to work, live, and play. I'm Christina Egan, your host. Today, I'm here with Mary Fernandez. She is a select board member for the town of Casco, serving since 2010, and also Victoria Pelletier, Portland City Councilor for District 2 since 2021. Mary is the first Black woman ever elected to the Casco Select Board, and Victoria is the second Black woman elected to the City of Portland Council. And she also is serving on the most diverse city council that Portland has ever had, and it is women-led, majority women. If you have a question for Mary or Victoria, give us a call at 207-780-4909. Again, that's 780-4909. Mary, I'm so glad to have you at the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And Victoria, it's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So before the show, you guys were joking around about how you first met each other. Can you tell everybody who's listening how that happened?
So I'll set the scene. I was working at GP Cog, and I was the office manager there. And then I think you rang the door. I don't know if you rang the doorbell. You may have just
that was courteous then. I rang the doorbell,
and you were looking for Christina, and I think Christina was in a meeting.
Yes.
And you were like, "Oh no, it's fine. I need to talk to her," and just like blew past me. And I was like, "No, you can't wait." And then I was following you around the office at GP Cog, and you were like, "No, she knows me. It's okay." And I was like, what's happening? And
Mary can Zoom, too.
You were moving fast, and I was really new, so
I was determined. I said I had to Christina, open the door, and all these people are just looking at me. I'm going, Christina, can I speak with you for a minute, please?
Yes. And
I said, of course.
Yeah. And you said you have a drill sergeant up front, and I was like, I didn't know what's going on.
Victoria, the drill sergeant.
I know. But then we met again at a party, and it was great.
Yeah, it was.
It's so great to have you both here. I mean, you both are have been in this region for a long time, and Tori, you grew up in Maine.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about where you grew up and a little bit about your background here.
Yeah, I grew up in Brunswick, and so I graduated from Brunswick High School, and that was an experience as well because I grew up in a town with very little diversity. So that was really interesting. So when I graduated from high school, I was like, I need to get out of here. I need to take a break from living in Maine and living in Brunswick. So I actually went to the University at Albany in New York for college. And that was a really great experience for me because I got to be around a ton of diversity. I got to take Black history courses for the first time, and I really got to feel myself a little bit more immersed in my culture and in different ethnicities and different experiences in a way that I hadn't experienced growing up here. But I still love Brunswick. My parents still live there. I was just there, so that's really, really good as well. And it's nice now to be back in Maine, but to be living in Portland. And I've lived in Portland now for probably about 7 years at this point. So,
And now you're serving.
And now I'm serving on the city council.
Yeah. Great. And Mary, how about you? You weren't born in Maine. You were born a little further south.
Yeah, I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And it's the largest city, Bridgeport, in the state of Connecticut. And I lived in a world where there were 22 different nationalities. There were 44 different dialects. And keep in mind, when I was in elementary school, a lot of my classmates came from Germany, from Poland, because this was right after World War II. So we were growing up, our parents, any parent, you were to respect your elders and respect other people.
No matter what their background.
No matter their background, no matter their handicap or whatever the case might be.
And so what brought you to Maine?
Well, I had a dear friend that I used to come visit in the 80s, and I liked Maine. I was in Kennebunk. I'd always go to Kennebunk. And once I started traveling out, it reminded me of how I grew up. A lot of water, green environment, so to speak. And it appealed to me.
And Casco is
That's
near Sebago Lake.
That's right.
It's very rural, very bucolic. Why Casco?
Well, it was really by accident. But I had a friend. I was living in Casco. I was doing assisted living, and I was getting ready to leave Maine. And believe it or not, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but there was a voice in my left ear that said stay. And it was so vivid. I started screaming. If you drove by slowly and saw me, you would have swore I was talking to myself. I was like, Casco, are you kidding me? So let's move. 2 years later, I bought my own house. And I liked it. I didn't like the part where when I was doing yard work, trucks and cars would ride by, nigger bitch, black bitch, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I just had to tune that out of my head because I had a vision for the property.
And you've made that, I've been by your property, and it is like a beautiful yellow house surrounded by beautiful gardens.
Yep.
Yeah, you've made it happen.
Yeah, thank you.
So Victoria, you decided to run for office, and Mary, I'm going to ask you the same question too. What made you want to serve in public office?
Yeah, it was interesting how I got there because I was doing like a lot of advocacy work like outside of that and like, getting involved, especially after George Floyd's murder. I feel like a lot shifted for me where I found myself getting involved in like grassroots advocacy just in the streets of Portland and protesting and organizing and really being part of those spaces in a large way. And I never grew up. I didn't have any aspirations to run for office. People would ask if I ever thought about it, and I was always giving the same answer of like, that sounds terrible. Like, I don't want to get involved. That sounds horrible for me, so no thank you. But I was always kind of like trying to get people involved and trying to get them to go to this current city council meetings and give public comment and make your voice heard and be involved in your community. And so when that seat for District 2 opened up, a lot of people were asking if I was going to run for the seat. And I realized in that moment that I would have told somebody else with like no experience, younger, Black person, a renter, like, oh, you're going to be perfect for that. You should run for the seat. And so I realized I had to take my own advice in that way and just run and see what happened. And so I ran my first campaign. I had no idea what I was doing. It was quite an adventure. But yeah, I was really, it was great to get to talk to so many people. And I think the day I realized how far my impact went was voting day, when I was doing poll greeting and saying like, hi, I'm Victoria, thanks for coming to vote. And a lot of people were really excited to see me and were like, oh my gosh, yes, I voted for you. And that felt really great. So I think that was the first moment I realized how far my reach had gone throughout like the 4 months that I was campaigning. So yeah, it was an adventure, but I won my seat, and now I am halfway through my term, which is crazy. I've served a year and a half now, and I have a year and a half left. Again? We'll see. Who knows? That's always a question mark question if I'm going to run again.
Not for public radio.
Yeah.
Mary, you mentioned how when you first bought your house in Casco that people drove by and yelled horrible insults and racist epithets at you. What made you decide that you really wanted to be in public office in a community where you had been attacked that way?
Well, here's another odd thing. I became involved because it was all because of email. And there were a group of Casco residents that came to my house, said, would you mind reading this? And it was a racist email that was forwarded by a municipal officer. I knew nothing about municipal government, anything like that. But I was just infuriated that a public official, I don't care what you do in your private life. So I went to the board meeting. I read the email and how...
Out loud, like in public comment?
Oh, yes. Yep. And then before I knew it, the next day, Channel 8 was calling me. Channel 12 was calling me. I was in the papers because it's just not the right thing. And there was a radio show here. And I think they had made that their subject for the hour. And they said they had to shut down the meeting because everything was so racial. They were getting like over 200 calls and they were all racist and stuff like that. So that was kind of like my environment. And then when I went to the board meeting, I decided to go to a couple more. And then I said, wait a minute. And I had a cohort, Ray Grant. There were 8 candidates, Ray and I being 2 of the 8. And we would go to the board meetings. And then all of a sudden, I noticed they they would bid on equipment that was like over $250,000, and you don't have a RFP, request for proposal. You get like 3 bids, and that should be a standard policy.
Yeah, it's a professional way of running a municipality.
Yeah, and so plus we realized, Grant and I, that I'll make this real quick, that the townspeople didn't have easy access to the meetings, so we advocated televising them.
That's great. That's great. So I'm here having a conversation with Victoria Pelletier and Mary Fernandez, 2 of our, I'd say, pioneer women, Black women who have run for local office in our region. It's so great to have the conversation with them, and we invite you to join. You can call in at 780-4909. And you're listening to Let's Connect Greater Portland, and I'm Christina Egan. And I'm going to go back, Victoria, I'm going to start with you, to ask you a little bit about what your experience was like campaigning. I mean, both you and Mary have talked about how you wanted to run being kind of inspired by being at the microphone at public comment, right? And asking other people to kind of speak up about things that you're observing that aren't right. So as you transition from that moment of realizing that it had to be you that ran, what was it like getting out and talking to people and campaigning, particularly because we do continue to have a lot of racism in Maine?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, campaigning was parts of it I really enjoyed, and there were parts of it I absolutely hated. I mean, canvassing I hated, and
canvassing meaning going door to
door, which I had never done before. And there's a thing that happens when you knock on someone's door and it's their home, and especially I think when there's a racial dynamic and a gender dynamic, and a lot of times there was an age dynamic, so I'm knocking on people's doors. And I didn't realize this because, again, I had no idea what I was doing, because I was telling other Black women, I was going canvassing alone. And they're like, alone? They're like, why are you going alone? I was like, I don't know. I thought it was just going to get signatures. They were like, don't ever do that again.
Yeah, that's a no-no.
So maybe I should have called Mary and been like, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? They told me don't do that. Because that was really bad. And then after that, I never went alone again. But that was really hard. I had a lot of racist experiences. I had somebody yell at me. They crumpled up my palm card and threw it at me as I was retreating down their steps, because they were get off of my property. People had slammed doors in my faces. So it was really brutal at times with that part of the campaign. I think weirdly the part that I liked the most were the debates, because a lot of people, I was the underdog in my race. A lot of people were like, who is that? Nobody has ever heard of her. I was running against somebody that had a popular name and had what they love to say is experience. And so that was always my thing. She has no experience. And I would always counter that with, I am experiencing every significant issue that we're having right now in Portland. So racial equity, that's my experience. Affordable housing, that's my experience. Rents being way too high is my experience. Climate change, I'm a younger person. Our sea levels are rising. That's going to be something that I'm going to have to really be dealing with as I get older. So that's my experience. So that was always my conversation at the doors and in the debates, was if you're not going to elect a younger Black woman who is a renter, who is living in Portland in a significant time when everybody is being priced out and we're trying to figure out what to do to ensure that young people can live here, to ensure that renters are protected. If you're not going to elect me, who is living that environment right now, then I don't know who you would elect at the end of the day. If we want our policymakers to be the ones with lived experience, at least I do, I want to make sure that the people making the policies in Portland are living that experience and not just talking about it, not just reading about it. So as much as I hated the campaign process in a lot of ways, and a lot of it was just because I was like, what am I doing? I don't know. Where do I put my sign? The lawn sign. I was like, where do I put my lawn sign? I don't know what's going on. I feel like the conversations I was able to have were really great. And I think that inspired a lot of people that were like, wait, she is a renter and she can talk about affordable housing and racial equity in a way that we haven't heard before. So yeah, canvassing was not great, but there were some highlights of the campaign that I remember that significantly helped me win, and I think gave a lot of people an insight to me that they didn't have before.
Mary, you've served since 2010, so you've been in office for 23 years. You have run even more campaigns.
23 years? Is it 23 years?
Oh, no, wait. I'm doing my math wrong. Sorry, 13 years.
Oh.
Sorry. Oh, boy.
The brain is aging.
Here.
Wait a minute. So, Tori, you and I are the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I loved canvassing.
Okay.
Because you know why? I had to think of something clever to say that would grab your attention within 2 minutes. Because after that, you lose interest. And I had a whole lot to say. And I like making jokes. You know what I mean? This and
What,
that.
you? Making jokes?
Now I want to hear one. I want to hear your opening line.
So I love that part. Plus, I was campaigning, and I had people in my town. I was so lucky. I had a campaign manager. I had other people who were putting out brochures and that sort of thing, knocking on doors. Ray Grant and I decided to co-campaign together. So whenever he knocked on the door or whatever, he would mention my name and vice versa. Now, debating, I had a little bit problem with. Because I had a tendency to bang the table. If somebody...
You can't do that in here because the microphone's going crazy.
It was horrible. I mean, it was brutal in 2010. They were spewing lies. They're telling stories. I mean, it was all wrong. And then one of them, it was this long table, and he mentioned my name. And then he said something, and I banged the table and all the cups and everything. And I said, oh, dear, I got to stop doing that. I got to find a better way to express myself. I said, but when you get your facts straight, you come back and let me know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
It was, it was a brutal
Sounds
year.
like and quite a biting retort you had there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you decided to run, both of you, what were the things that, I mean, Tori, you've spoken about the housing market and the shortage and how hard it is for young people. You've spoken about climate change. You've spoken about racial equity. Mary, when you think about the things that really motivated you to run, what was it in Casco that you decided, like, okay, I've got to be at the table here. My voice needs to be heard.
Well, that was just it, the email. And I mean, that right there reverberated through mass media, the newspaper, this and that. And I had to show them that, not show them, but I'm just like you. Do you know what I mean? I sleep and breathe. I have some of the same issues. I'd like to see more vision or whatever the case might be. And I made quite a few. Yeah, and then some people say, why don't you come back? Especially I start cracking my jokes. But I say, I gotta go.
And Tori, as you're going into this next year, the city of Portland's had a lot of change. You have a new city manager. You've got a mayoral race coming up. What are some of the things that you hope that the city can do, especially for people that have the lived experience that you have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I go back to our goal that we set at the beginning of this session, which was racial equity. So we had a ton of stickies that we were putting on paper of what we wanted to prioritize, and racial equity was our number one priority. So I always try and center our work back to that, because it wasn't just like it was my vote or somebody else's vote. The entire council prioritized racial equity based on like where we were putting our sticky notes. So that feels exciting because we are rapidly diversifying. We have a large demographic of asylum seekers that are coming to Portland. So I want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to be a welcoming city and to really show up for disenfranchised and under-resourced communities. So I'm excited that we just recently hired the city's first ever DEI director. We have the first ever DEI department. That we've never had that before. And I'm really excited for that to continue to expand and for that to kind of change how City Hall looks to a lot of people too. A lot of people are intimidated to even walk into City Hall because it's not like the most welcoming place when you look at it looming up like over
intimidating.
you. It's really intimidating. Where do I walk? Yeah, so I think that's a huge part of it that I'm looking forward to us prioritizing. And then, of course, our affordable housing crisis, the fact that Portland's overrun with short-term rentals and Airbnbs, and we really need to figure out what we're going to do significantly about that because continuously people are being priced out and just can't afford to live here. And what I love about Portland is that this is a city that is a beautiful city. We're on the water. Everybody was a big foodie city. But also we have a lot of people that have grown up here and like to want to stay here. They don't want to leave and go move somewhere else. And I think that's the beauty of a place with like 60 to 70,000 people is that a lot of people are saying, this is my home and I want to be able to stay here. I want to be able to raise a family here and put down roots. And if we don't have places for them to live, if they can't afford to actually exist here, then we have a huge problem. And I think the Portland that we all love is going to significantly change if we can't really make sure that, the individuals that are working class and that really just want to continue to work and live here aren't able to do that. So I would say, of course, short-term rentals, housing, and then racial equity, and really making sure that we are transforming the outside of what City Hall looks like, and making sure that what we reflect on the inside is reflective of the true demographic of Portland, which is diversified and culturally and ethnically diverse at this point. So yeah, I'm looking forward to really prioritizing these two significant things based on the goals that we had in December.
I'm really glad you're taking on the small things.
Yeah. No, it's just light work. It's going to get done in a couple days. Yeah.
Right now, I'm having a conversation with Victoria Pelletier of the Portland City Council and Mary Fernandez of the Board of Selectmen and Casco. You're listening to WMPG's Let's Connect Greater Portland, and I'm Christina Egan, your host. I in talking with Mary over the years, I know there's some people that have really inspired you, including people in your family. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how you came to be such a strong woman. I mean, you're one of the only Black women in our rural communities. You're certainly the only Black woman who has been elected to local office in many of our rural communities. How did you develop that strength? I mean, who do you look up to, and how do you keep going, Mary?
My grandmother was the first African-American police officer in the city of Bridgeport, Connecticut. My mother worked at a local college for 44 years, and the mayor commemorated December 6th as Mary E. Eady Day. My mother, even after she retired from nursing, she had her own television show. And you know what one of the first topics they talked about was ageism and how to survive growing older and get active. So they're in my DNA, so yeah. Yep. And it's just my mother. I remember 2010 was so horrible, and I had to call up my mother. Do you know what I mean? And I said, Ma, they're telling lies about me. I mean, I was distraught. And my mother, in her cool, calm way, said, Mary, always remember that cream rises to the top. And if you decide to get down with the muck and mire, you will begin to smell like them. I was good after that. I was good.
That is fantastic advice.
And then my great-grandmother, the Great Migration out of the South was during the 1920s. My great-grandmother came to New York according to the 1910 federal census. So she knew what was up, and she was out of there a decade before
the Great Migration.
The Great Migration.
Yeah,
yep.
From the South to the North, of Black people coming to North.
Yep.
Tori, do you have some folks that you kind of turn your thoughts to when you're feeling challenged?
Yeah, I'm lucky to have a really great community, especially here in Portland, of friends that really lift me up. Especially, the past 6 months have been really hard for me, and I've been really blessed to have a community that has been really supportive of me, and just being there and having my back in ways that I could have never imagined. So that has been really great. And then I love looking at other Black women in leadership positions around the state, like Mary, who are really like who I aspire to try and be, because I think that I wouldn't even be able to be awarded these opportunities if it wasn't for trailblazers like you and others who are really making that path for me. And so I think it's really important too that I remember that and start creating a path for somebody else to really be able to follow along. So I think Jill Doosan said, like, very often that it's great to be the first, great to be the second, but just make sure that you're not the last in terms of being Black women in office. So, thinking about the levels of who I'm inspired by, I really circle back to that too, because I think that we have a really great, powerful group of Black women in leadership positions, and it can be a very lonely position. I'm privileged actually to be in Portland versus being in an area that's more rural where it's challenging. And I'm challenged here in Portland, so I know that there's such a difference between our challenges.
Like night and day.
Yeah. So I just am really inspired by you and by so many others, and I think that's really what keeps me going in terms of trying to be a leader and make change.
Well, that's good to hear because you know what? I'm in my own zone back in the rural neighborhoods, and it can be hard sometimes. Do you know what I mean? But
Lonely.
good for you.
Yeah.
Good. It is lonely at
lonely.
the
Yeah.
top.
It's lonely.
And also for me, because I've done other things in my life. I've worked in laboratories across America. I was generally the first woman and the first woman of color. I worked in 10 different laboratories, from microbiology to entomology, quality control. I was always the first woman and the first one of color to work in that laboratory. And I'm going to tell you, it just gets tiring.
Yep.
It really does.
So-
It bears down on your soul. So you look for other things, like you said. It's good that I have a lot of friends to support me. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Because the dynamics to me are different when you're young and energetic than when you're, well, let's say older and about ready to get off the choo-choo train. But you understand what I'm saying.
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
So we're getting near the end of the show. I'm always amazed at how fast the time goes. And, I want to go back to that Jill Dusson quote about not being the last. And yet it's so hard to be a Black woman who's elected. And I think back to some work that Victoria, you and I did it at GPCOG, where we brought together people who were from diverse backgrounds, from gender, ethnicity, religion, even working moms, right? Like to try to talk to them about why it's important for diverse people to be on council. So given how hard it is, would you encourage other people of similar backgrounds to run? And unfortunately, I only got 30 seconds on this
Well,
one.
30 seconds. Can I say something real
Yeah.
quick? I just want to thank the town of Casco, my supporters, the residents, for supporting me for the past 13 years. This is my 4th term, and I'm proud to be a member of the Casco Select Board.
And we're glad to have you in that leadership position.
And I'm not running for governor or anything like that. So it's not.
I thought a little announcement was coming. I was like,
Victoria, what would you say to other people that are thinking about running for office of diverse backgrounds?
Definitely talk to other Black women who are currently serving office and have that conversation, and just make sure that you have a support system, make sure that you know how to take breaks, and make sure that you are really centering and prioritizing your mental and emotional health, because this job is really hard and it can be really inspiring and powerful, but it can also be really lonely, like we've talked about.
And that's true. Sometimes I have to shut down.
Yep.
And I go to other cities here in Maine where I have my friends, my dear friends. A lot of them I grew up with. And it's like a bandage.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Victoria, Mary, you're trailblazers. Thank you so much for joining me today on this show. Really appreciate having you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you so much for having us. Are you going to run for governor?
I also want to thank Joshua Brister, our sound engineer, and WMPG, who collaborates with the Greater Portland Council of Governments in producing this show. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio. Join us next week for another conversation about the great work and the great people in our communities. Until then, be kind to yourself and to each other. I'm Christina Egan. See you next time on Let's Connect Greater Portland.
See, I told you I can't control myself.
No, that was so
no,
good.
Great. It was
No,
great.
I
It was so good.
No,
I
but-
had to,